Hello everyone and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program New Sunrise. This is another episode of my testbed world because I'm still working to develop the lander. So here is a look at my development process so far. And most of these are on the moon because I've been testing them by jumping them over there. So let's see, we want landers and we want grade 1. So this was the first one I tried out, because after a while of having a lot of issues trying to fit everything into one payload, I switched over to making them into separate payloads, so I tried to get a lander that could land a specific part. So here is the first one on that line. This is just a workshop, so it's got solar panels, it's got a crew of Bob Cooman Sr. in this save. It's also got batteries, it's got some rocket fuel, still got a fair bit of liquid fuel left over, and it's got these big 4 rockets, which allow it to zero out its horizontal velocity, which is to say its orbit section, and then to maintain and control its vertical velocity when it's actually descending onto the planetoid. And of course we've got these legs. I think these are actually like hydraulic in the newer version, but this is still done in 0.21. So this was just the workshop. The second thing that needs to land is, let's see if I can hop to it from here. The second thing that needs to land is the launch pad itself. So let's switch over to that, because this was the second launch of this particular variety of design I did. So, yep, similar thing, much shorter, as you can see. No crew, completely robotic. I think it's actually controlled from this. Oh, no, there we are, remote, I hadn't seen it. It's been a little while since I designed this thing and dropped it. So once I had these, and I noticed that I still had some extra fuel, I went the next logical step, which was a grade 3 version, which carries the launch pad and the rocket workshop. So there we are. I kind of turned it into a kind of just like truck, effectively. So this still has some spare fuel left, and it's got more or less all the pieces it needs, except it has no rocket part capacity. So it lands, and it has no way to build anything, which is important because it needs to build these things. It needs to build something with a smelter unit. This is a modified Kethane engine model. I've been tweaking the smelter because in Extraplanetary Launchpads it is huge and obscenely heavy, as well as obscenely expensive, and this thing needs to have, with this specific design, you need to land and be able to build the smelter unit to convert ore into metal and then into rocket parts via the workshop, and you need a mining rover. So making the two of those is kind of impossible with this design. Which then brings me to the Mark IV, which has some significant issues, to say the least. Where are we? There we are. Okay. This is the Mark IV, presently still in orbit, presently still has all of its liquid fuel and such. Has a fairly large capacity, that adds about 4¼ tons, and has lights and everything, and it also has wheels, just in case I need to drive around. Of course these wheels all exploded when I was loading it up. So let's get Hadful out here to fix those. Get the lights on. So this one has the smelter unit built in, because after a while I realized it was going to be very prohibitive to actually have all of the rocket parts on the thing to make both a smelter and a rover, so I tried to reduce it as much as possible by reducing it to just the rover. Okay, let's fix these wheels, because we're going to need them. You can see on the front there it has some Kerbal attachment system ports, which is good for attaching to the rover to transfer ore for the smelter, and to, there you go, to transfer over materials. Also has some big Kethane tanks, but they're empty, because they are very light and they are a fantastic structural component that way. Okay, next wheel, and the final one. Yeah, so firstly I had this thing just running off of landing struts, and then I switched over to giving it wheels, because for one thing, these things seem to have a bit of suspension. They kind of cushion the impact when it lands. And for another thing, they're if they enable it to drive around on the surface, if, for example, I happen to massively miss the landing point, which is quite probable knowing me. Okay, so you can also see there's got a fulcrum here, because one of the big problems I had when I first started plugging these two modules together is that the launch pad is very wide when it's open, so I had to add this this rail, I think it's called a rail, yeah, adjustable rail, in order to shuffle this around a bit so that this can actually be far enough away that nothing explodes. That was one of the big problems with my earlier designs. But I need to shift that right back to where it needs to be. Lock it. I have the GUI for now. And it's dark. I apologize for that. This is the dark side of the moon, which is also the main reason that the only thing powering this stuff is RTGs. There aren't that many, and they don't produce much power individually, but they produce power and it's fine because they're like daylight insensitive, which I like to have as part of my designs. Okay, so we are largely all ready to go here. I cannot for the life of me remember. Yes, I do have docking struts in this. So let's see if I can hook these onto something. I was playing around a lot, so it's possible I removed the docking struts these were supposed to connect to, which I did because this gets kind of wobbly when you kick up the power. These are more or less the smallest engines I've managed to find, the Rockomax Mark 55 radial mount liquid engines. They look like jet engines. They look pretty nice for that way. The smallest engines I've managed to find that actually has sufficient power to slow this thing down fast enough. But as you can see there, looking at our delta V, we have 655 meters per second. That's basically how much change we can get. We have 553 surface velocity, and if we look at our surface here, our horizontal speed is that 553, which is a problem, because it means we have very, very little spare thrust. So for purpose of demonstration, I'm going to try and land this thing, and you'll see why we have issues. Okay, so we've got our lights on, we've got our engines ready, the launch pad is locked, and with that, we shall now begin. I'll turn on the LCS. I initially didn't have any LCS on this thing, but it became a necessity because this thing is kind of unstable. So I have to pay substantial attention to it, but you see we're all really out of orbit, judging by the camera motion. And I am trying to stay as close as possible to the center of the retrograde marker, so that we make the most efficient use of our delta V. And it's coming down. Again, we are not going to have much spare, and I'll show you why that's a problem once we get to that point. Okay, less than 80, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, we are cutting there. Watch our retrograde marker float to the surface, float to the top there. Okay, so that has basically murdered our horizontal velocity, which reduces our trajectory to almost a straight line, which is a good start. And yeah, our horizontal speed is still dropping, but our vertical speed is climbing, as you can see there. So I need to burn meters per second here to ensure that we do not end up smashing into the surface like a wayward comet. And I'm burning this a little early as far as things go, so let's turn that off, just trying to negate our horizontal a bit more. Okay, so let's get to the zeros there. Right, so we're coming down, and more or less I'm going to wait until we hit... Yep, that's what I was waiting for. Waiting for our lights to kick in. Okay. And we are now out of fuel, which means that happens. That is the problem right now. Okay, if we can stop moving. All of our legs have burst, all of our wheels have burst here. And we lost something. I think one of the lights may have exploded. Let's turn off the RCS. And we haven't lost any of the tanks, which is good, nor have we lost any of the rockets. So technically, I don't think we've lost anything important. This is technically a successful landing. But as you saw, very hard, very temperamental, and generally a massive pain. But now we can actually show this thing getting out. So disengage the lock on that, show the GUI, move it out on the adjustable rail, and open up the launch pad. Now this is with the tinkering of the parts. I changed the smelter to be a lot smaller. Firstly, it's using the Kethane reactor engine from Kethane mod. It's also a lot lighter. I think it's like half the weight at the moment. I don't want to make it any lower. And it's also significantly less efficient. So we lose a lot more of our ore to it. But it's now reasonably landable. And it's now conceivable as something you can actually have on a craft at the landing. So that's good. Okay, so we've got our thing open now. Re-engage that lock, hide the GUI again. And let's have her free go on EVA. And fix some of those wheels so we can drive this around a bit. And this is evidently one of the versions where I didn't have the lights on the front, so this will be a very dark drive. And we're going to see some interesting physics here. There we go. Yeah, it leaps up whenever I do that. Because the wheels sort of clip into the ground because they're resting on it at the moment. It doesn't do that in space for obvious reasons. Okay, so off we go. Fix all the tires. The mass is pretty okay on this thing at the moment. This is the most recent, well, one of the most recent versions. I've mostly just been tinkering after adding that. Now that hex can carries more or less the prescribed volume of parts that I need to create the rover, which in turn has a Kerbal attachment, there we go, a Kerbal attachment system winch at the front, so that we can actually hook it up to this and get everything creating. And once we've got the Extraplanetary Launchpad section of things going, we can then happily worry about everything else, like the Kethane stuff. Although the Extraplanetary Launchpads mod has seen some updates recently, the first and biggest being that it's no longer managed by the same guy, it is now managed by Taniwa, who previously was doing mostly just tiny little adjustments to it, adding things like orbital launchpad capacity, for example. That's also fairly inefficient as far as this particular setup goes, but I'm not touching that just yet, because I kind of want to actually make my lander, so that I can expand the operational realm of ships in general for New Sunrise. But we've got our stuff running now, so let us see if we can drive. Yep, and we are gaining speed, slowly but surely, because I think we're on the side of a crater. Let's take a look. And it's hard to tell. You can see the curbing is very cluttered over there. Just from all of my warping stuff around and stuff. Okay, so yeah, we are picking up speed and we can drive. So let us switch to an internal view. Yeah, look at that. That's an RTG directly ahead of us, so technically speaking we're directly behind a nuclear reactor. But we are moving. So we can relocate, we can technically land. But the big problem there with this whole design, and the fact that it lacks so much liquid fuel, well, the fact that it lacks delta V, and the fact that it exploded on landing, as you saw there, even with me being very careful, if slightly distracted by talking, is this is the moon. The moon has its own stats. So its gravity, for example, is a specific volume that we are using to describe everything. And can I see its infinite? Yeah, okay, so gravity is 0.166 G, which is to say it's about a tenth that of Kerbin's, which is why this has so much capacity to control itself. This is our marker. The moon is our benchmark, effectively. If we can land the lander on the moon, we can land it anywhere. If we barely land it on the moon, then there is a whole ton of stuff inside of the Kerbal system which is going to have issues with. So let's see, let's hop over to Duna, our Mars analog, and let's check in on Moho. Well, there's Ike. Let's try using Ike. Ike's gravity is 0.112, so we can probably land okay on Ike. Moho should be around here somewhere. No, that's not it. I'm seeing it somewhere there. Okay, don't know where Moho's gone. But Leif is probably a good one to go with, actually. Leif has a minimal atmosphere. Take a look at that. Ah, there's Moho. Moho is a non-atmospheric planet. Its gravity is 0.275 G. So by being atmosphereless, it is actually, strictly speaking, one of the things that we'd be looking at landing on. But it's almost twice the gravity of the moon. So if we want to land on Moho, we need a lot more spare delta V when we're landing on the moon. And that is where I'm getting problems, because we have no spare delta V whatsoever right now, even if we are landing a technically functional rover. So that is where I'm having issues. Hang on, why are we having... Oh, throttled up. Okay, sorry. Fix that. Go. So, yeah, I'm tweaking things here and there. The smelter is the first part I've ever modified so dramatically, certainly, if indeed at all. So that's where I sit at the moment, basically. I have to try and eke out a lot more delta V in order to get this thing to function properly. The previous models, like the one before the parts capacity and such, work pretty much fine. But they lack the functional capacity to actually serve the purpose. So this thing has 737 meters per second. That is when this tank is empty. As I say, its weight goes up about 4¼ tons when I add in the hexcan parts, the rocket parts, to actually build the rover that it needs. So that is a problem. But we have the workshop, we have the parts, we have the smelter, and we have the launch pad, so as long as we can land it, theoretically we can build something, but we might need the rover first, and I'd rather not take more than one lander part, because that brings up all manner of logistical issues, and also it means more launches, which creates more debris, and we're trying to avoid that, if those of you around here remember. So yeah, that is that. I'm going to include this this craft in the description below. The mod packs it uses are the Infernal Robotics. I think it's the Infernal Robotics. It's one of the robotics ones. I can't remember which. It uses the Extraplanetary Launchpads, and it uses Kethane, as well as the Kerbal Attachment System and Kerbal Engineer. I'll also include the modified smelter component. A lot of people seem to work out Extraplanetary Launchpads by modifying things like that. I've seen a few people co-opt various parts of the Kethane Pack, but I'm just trying to modify what that has. So that is that for now. I hope you enjoyed this little update, and I shall catch you all next time. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and or a favourite. Follow me on Twitter and subscribe to be notified of future updates. You can also check out the website where most other content is uploaded. That's all for now. Catch you later.